The alarm blared through the hallways of Horizon 9, a small research outpost perched on the edge of explored space. Jake Miller ignored it, his eyes fixed on the sample under his microscope. The flashing red lights reflected off his glasses as he adjusted the focus. "Final warning. All personnel must evacuate immediately," announced the computerized voice. "This is not a drill." Jake sighed and pushed back from his workstation. At 32, he had spent the last 5 years on this remote moon studying its unique ecosystem. He wasn't about to abandon his research for what was probably another false alarm. The door to his lab slid open with a hiss. Tom, the station's security officer, stood in the doorway with a worried expression. "Jake, you need to get moving. The transport leaves in 15 minutes. "What's happening this time?" Jake asked, carefully storing his samples. Alliance Command sent word that Amors escaped from their research facility in the next system. Tom said, his voice tight. "They think it's headed here." Jake froze. The Moors were legendary, the most lethal predators known to the galaxy. Most people believed they were just stories to scare children, but the scientific community knew better. "That's impossible," Jake said. "No Moors has ever been captured alive." "Well, they had one, and now they don't. Everyone's evacuating." Jake glanced at his research station. 5 years of work, samples that couldn't be transported on short notice. "I'll come after I secure the lab," Jake promised. Tom hesitated, then nodded. "Don't take long." After Tom left, Jake moved quickly, but not to pack. Instead, he downloaded his research to a portable drive and grabbed his field kit. If Amors was really coming to this moon, he wasn't going to miss the chance to observe it. No xenobiologist had ever documented a living specimen. 2 hours later, the outpost stood empty except for Jake. From his hiding spot in the observation tower, he watched the last transport rise into the sky. The setting sun cast long shadows across the alien landscape of purple vegetation and rock formations. That night, Jake ventured into the wilderness with his equipment. The moon's 3 smaller moons provided enough light to see by as he set up recording devices around a clearing. Something had triggered the sensors he placed throughout the region earlier that week. As he worked, the forest grew quiet. Too quiet. Jake felt the hair on the back of his neck stand up. He was being watched. Slowly, he turned around. At first, he saw nothing. Then a patch of darkness seemed to move between 2 trees. It wasn't just shadows. The darkness had form, substance. "Hello," Jake said softly, fighting every instinct that told him to run. The shape paused. It was massive, at least 8 feet tall, with a body that seemed to absorb the moonlight rather than reflect it. Its outline shifted slightly, as if it wasn't quite solid. Jake's heart hammered in his chest, but he held his ground. "I'm not going to hurt you." The creature moved closer, revealing 4 glowing eyes arranged in a diamond pattern. Its body remained hard to see, like looking at a hole in space. Jake realized he was seeing Amors, not just any predator, but the apex hunter that had terrified advanced civilizations for centuries, and it was studying him with what appeared to be curiosity rather than hunger. Slowly, Jake set down his scanner. The readings were off the charts. Energy signatures unlike anything recorded in Alliance databases. The Moors moved closer still. Jake could feel its presence in his mind, a light touch that carried no malice. "You're not what they said you were, are you?" Jake whispered. The creature tilted its head, the movement surprisingly gentle for something so powerful. One shadowy limb extended toward Jake's scanner, tapping it with what seemed like deliberate care. In that moment, Jake understood something that would change his life forever. The Moors wasn't mindless. It was intelligent. And somehow, against all odds, it had chosen not to harm him. As they regarded each other in the moonlight, Jake knew he had just made first contact with a species the galaxy had completely misunderstood. 3 days had passed since Jake's first encounter with the Moors. He named the creature Shade, after its ability to blend with shadows. Each night, Jake returned to the same clearing, and each night, Shade appeared. Tonight, Jake brought something new, a holographic projector. He set it on a flat rock and activated it. A three-dimensional star map glowed in the darkness. "This is where we are," Jake said, pointing to a small dot. He wasn't sure if Shade understood human speech, but it seemed to respond to his voice. Shade moved closer, its four glowing eyes fixed on the map. Jake watched in amazement as one shadowy limb reached out and passed through the hologram. Then Shade did something unexpected. It added a new star to the map, pulling light from the projection to create a bright point in an empty region. "Is that your home?" Jake asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Shade made a low rumbling sound, the first vocalization Jake had heard from it. The creature moved its limb across the map, drawing a path from its added star to their current location. Then it showed a smaller shape being taken from the star. "They captured you," Jake realized. "The Alliance took you from your home." Shade's form rippled, its edges becoming sharper, more defined. The peaceful feeling in Jake's mind changed to something darker, not threatening toward him, but filled with painful memories. Jake switched off the hologram. "I'm sorry." The next morning, Jake was reviewing the night's recordings when his communications panel lit up. A message from Alliance Command scrolled across the screen. "Priority ALERT. Military forces arriving 24 hours. Remain in shelter. More is specimen. Extremely dangerous. Shoot on sight or dearest SUED." Jake's stomach tightened. He couldn't let them kill Shade. The creature had shown no aggression, only intelligence and curiosity. It deserved to be understood, not hunted. He worked frantically through the day, gathering all his data on Shade. The recording showed complex behaviors, problem-solving abilities when presented with Jake's scientific equipment, careful examination of plants and small creatures without harming them, and attempts at communication through gesture and mental impression. As dusk approached, Jake heard the distant roar of engines. Looking through his binoculars, he spotted 3 military dropships descending toward the abandoned outpost. He had less time than he thought. Jake grabbed his pack and rushed to the clearing earlier than usual. To his surprise, Shade was already there, seemingly agitated. Its form shifted constantly, and the mental impression it projected felt urgent. "They're coming for you," Jake said. "The people who took you before." Shade moved toward the trees, then looked back at Jake. The mental impression changed. An invitation to follow. "You want me to come with you?" Jake asked. In response, Shade extended a shadowy limb toward him. Jake hesitated only briefly before reaching out. The touch felt cool and somehow electric, like placing his hand in moving water. Together, they ventured deeper into the forest than Jake had ever gone before. After an hour of walking, they reached a series of small caves hidden behind a waterfall. Inside the largest cave, Jake was astonished to find evidence that Shade had created a home. Arranged stones, collected plant specimens, and most surprisingly, crude drawings on the walls. The drawings told a story: the Moor's world, the arrival of Alliance ships, capture, experiments, and finally escape. Jake studied them carefully while Shade watched. "They hurt you," Jake said. "That's why they think you're dangerous. You were defending yourself." Shade made the rumbling sound again, but softer this time. It moved to the back of the cave and revealed something Jake hadn't noticed: a hidden chamber filled with glowing crystals that matched the color of Shade's eyes. In the crystal light, Shade's form became more visible. Jake could now see intricate patterns across its surface, like living circuitry. For the first time, he truly saw what he was dealing with: not a monster, but a being of remarkable complexity. As he sat in the hidden cave, Jake knew he had crossed a line. He was no longer just a scientist observing. He had become Shade's ally against those who would destroy it without understanding. Dawn broke over the horizon as Jake awoke in the crystal cave. Shade was gone, but had left a small arrangement of stones pointing toward the cave entrance. Jake understood the message: stay hidden. The distant sound of engines echoed through the forest. Military scouts were expanding their search perimeter. Jake activated his portable scanner and picked up Alliance communication signals. He adjusted the frequency until voices came through. Team Alpha, sweep quadrants 4 through 7. Beta Team, take the river basin. Remember, this creature killed 6 of our best scientists. Shoot on sight. Commander Reed wants the specimen dead by sundown. Jake switched off the scanner, heart pounding. 6 scientists dead. That didn't match what Shade had shown him. Something wasn't right. Cautiously, Jake moved to the cave entrance and peered through the waterfall. In the distance, he spotted flying drones scanning the treetops. He couldn't stay here. The cave would be discovered eventually. A soft rustling behind him made Jake turn. Shade had returned, carrying something in its shadowy limbs, a data tablet with Alliance markings. "Where did you get that?" Jake whispered, taking the device. The tablet was damaged but functional. Jake bypassed the security protocols, using his research credentials, and found himself looking at classified files about Project Umbra, the secret program that had captured and studied Shade species. The files revealed disturbing information. The Alliance hadn't captured just one Moors. They had taken 7 from their home planet. The experiments performed on them were cruel. Pain response tests, vivisection while conscious, forced adaptive evolution through extreme stimuli. The report stated that 1 specimen had died during capture. 4 more died during experiments. The 6th had been euthanized after showing signs of dangerous intelligence development. Shade was the 7th, the only one to escape. "They're lying about you," Jake said, looking up at Shade. "You didn't kill anyone." Shade's mental impression agreed, showing memories of desperate escape, but no violence toward the scientists. The deaths must have been fabricated to justify the hunt. Suddenly, the cave darkened as something passed overhead. Jake peeked outside and saw a scout ship hovering near the waterfall. They had to move now. "We need to go," Jake whispered. Together, they slipped out the back of the cave through a narrow passage Shade revealed. They emerged on a ridge overlooking a vast section of the forest. Jake could see Alliance forces spreading out in search patterns below. "They're everywhere," Jake muttered. Shade touched Jake's shoulder, projecting an image of the outpost. Jake understood immediately. Hide in plain sight. That's risky, but it might work. As night fell, they made their way back toward the research facility. Alliance forces were focused on the wilderness, leaving the outpost lightly guarded. Using his access codes, Jake snuck them into his old laboratory through a maintenance tunnel. "We should be safe here for now," Jake said, sealing the door. "They won't expect you to be inside their perimeter." Jake connected the damaged tablet to his lab computer and began downloading all the Project Umbra files. He needed evidence of the Alliance's crimes if he was going to help Shade. While the download progressed, Shade moved around the lab, examining everything with careful curiosity. It stopped at a genetic sequencer and placed a shadowy limb on the scanner pad. The machine activated automatically. Jake watched in astonishment as Shade's genetic structure appeared on the screen, a double helix unlike anything he'd seen before, with additional molecular structures that defied known biology. "That's impossible," Jake whispered, studying the results. "Your DNA can rewrite itself in real time. That's how you adapt so quickly." Shade's mental impression confirmed this, adding something else. This ability was not natural but engineered by something far older than the Alliance. The revelation was interrupted by an alarm. Jake looked at the security monitor and froze. A squad of soldiers led by a stern-faced officer was entering the main building. "That's Commander Reed," Jake said, recognizing the officer from Alliance broadcasts. "The man who ordered the hunt." Shade's form darkened, edges becoming razor-sharp. The mental impression it projected was clear. It recognized Reed as the overseer of the experiments that had tortured its kind. Jake placed a hand on Shade's shifting form. We can't fight them. But I have another idea. He looked at the genetic data still displaying on the screen. If Shade could adapt this dramatically, perhaps there was another way to escape the hunters, one that would turn their expectations against them. They're coming closer, Jake whispered, watching the security feed as Commander Reed and his soldiers methodically searched the research facility. We have about 10 minutes before they reach this section. Jake turned to Shade, who hovered near the laboratory's ventilation system. Can you squeeze through that? He asked, pointing at the narrow duct. Shade's body rippled in response, its form becoming thinner, more elongated. The creature slipped into the vent with surprising ease, but then paused, extending a tendril back toward Jake. I can't fit through there, Jake said. You should go without me. Shade remained half in the vent, unwilling to leave. Its mental impression grew stronger in Jake's mind. Not just feelings now, but something deeper, more complex. Suddenly, Jake gasped as his consciousness expanded. He wasn't just receiving impressions anymore. He was experiencing Shade's memories directly. The sensation was overwhelming. He saw a world with 3 suns where shadowy beings moved through crystal forests. He felt the terror of capture, the pain of experiments, the desperation of escape. What's happening? Jake whispered, gripping the edge of his desk as the flood of memories continued. Shade moved back into the room fully, approaching Jake. Its 4 eyes glowed brighter than before. The mental connection deepened, and Jake understood. The Moors species communicated through shared consciousness. Shade was forming a bond with him, something it would normally only do with its own kind. As the connection stabilized, Jake realized he could now send his own thoughts to Shade. Not just words, but images, emotions, and memories. You trust me this much? Jake asked, both verbally and mentally. Shade's response came as a complex tapestry of thought. Jake had shown compassion where others had shown cruelty. To the Moors, this made them connected, bonded. Through their new link, Shade revealed the truth about its species. The Moors weren't predators at all. On their homeworld, they were guardians of a delicate ecosystem, using their adaptive abilities to maintain balance. They hunted only when necessary, and never for sport or cruelty. The Alliance has it all wrong, Jake said, the realization striking him like a physical blow. Your people are protectors, not killers. A loud bang from the corridor broke their moment of connection. Commander Reed's voice came through the door. Check all labs on this level. The Moors can't have gone far. Jake looked at Shade, an idea forming. I know how to get us out of here, but you'll need to stay very close to me. Through their bond, Jake showed Shade his plan. The creature's form rippled in what Jake now recognized as agreement. As the soldiers approached, Jake took a deep breath and opened the door. He stepped into the hallway with confident strides, looking directly at Commander Reed. Dr. Miller, Reed said, surprised. We thought the facility was evacuated. I stay behind to secure my research, Jake replied calmly. What's the situation, Commander? Reed studied him suspiciously. We're hunting a dangerous specimen, a Moors that escaped from our research division. Have you seen anything unusual? Nothing, Jake said, feeling Shade's presence merged with his own shadow. Through their bond, he could sense the creature perfectly mimicking the shape and density of his natural shadow, becoming undetectable. You should join the evacuation team, Reed ordered. This creature is extremely dangerous. I'll gather my things, Jake agreed. But Commander, may I ask what makes this specimen so dangerous? My own research suggests the Moors are highly intelligent. Reed's expression darkened. Your research is irrelevant, Doctor. The Moors are monsters. This one killed 6 of our scientists. Through the bond, Jake felt Shade's anger flare at the lie. The shadow at his feet briefly rippled before stabilizing. I understand, Jake said quickly. I'll head to the evacuation point immediately. As he walked away, Reed called after him. Doctor, what happened to your eyes? Jake froze. My eyes. They looked different for a moment. Jake forced a casual laugh, probably just the lighting. I've been working too long without sleep. Reed nodded slowly, not entirely convinced. Get some rest after evacuation, Doctor. Walking away, Jake could feel the bond with Shade growing stronger. For a brief moment, Shade's perception had flowed into him so completely that his eyes had taken on the distinctive glow of the Moors. They were becoming more connected than either had anticipated. As they made their way toward the facility's exit, Jake realized this bond wasn't just their means of escape. It was something entirely new, something that neither humans nor Moors had experienced before, and it might be the only thing that could save them both. The evacuation ship hummed quietly as it prepared for departure. Jake sat alone in a corner, his shadow unnaturally dark against the metal wall. None of the other scientists paid him much attention. They were too busy discussing the Moors' threat in frightened whispers. I heard it can tear through reinforced steel, one technician said. I heard it killed an entire squad without making a sound, another replied. Jake kept his face neutral while Shade, still disguised as his shadow, sent waves of amusement through their bond. The stories were absurd, but they served a purpose, keeping everyone too afraid to look closely at the strange scientist and his unusually dense shadow. As the ship prepared to leave orbit, Jake felt a sudden urgency through the bond. Shade was showing him something, a feeling of wrongness about their destination. Where exactly are we being evacuated to? Jake asked a nearby security officer. Alliance Research Station Omega, the officer replied. Commander Reed wants all scientists familiar with this moon's ecosystem for debriefing. Through their connection, Jake saw Shade's memory of Station Omega, sterile labs, restraints, pain. It was where the experiments had happened. I need to get off this ship, Jake whispered to his shadow. Before Shade could respond, an alarm blared through the cabin. The ship's engines powered down. Attention all personnel, came Commander Reed's voice over the intercom. We have detected an anomaly in the evacuation protocols. All passengers must submit to security scanning before departure. Jake's heart raced. They were looking for Shade. This way, Dr. Miller, said a soldier, gesturing toward a scanning arch that had been hastily installed at the ship's exit. Through their bond, Jake felt Shade's fear. The scanner would detect the Moors instantly. As they approached the scanner, Jake whispered, "Do you trust me?" Shade's response flowed through him. Complete trust. Jake walked up to the scanner operator. "Excuse me, I need to retrieve something from my quarters before scanning. My medication. I'll be right back." The operator hesitated, then nodded. "Make it quick." Instead of heading to the quarters, Jake slipped down a maintenance corridor. Once alone, he placed his hand against the wall, allowing shade to flow from his shadow onto the surface. "They're hunting for you specifically," Jake said. "We need to split up." Shade's form rippled with reluctance, but Jake pressed on. "I'll create a distraction. You find your way to the cargo bay. There should be escape pods there. I'll meet you on the surface." Jake felt Shade's consciousness begin to withdraw from their bond. But before it fully disconnected, the creature shared one final memory, a vision of ancient ruins on the moon's surface, not far from where they had first met. "The ruins? You want me to meet you there?" Jake asked. Shade's form pulsed once in confirmation, then melted into the shadows of the corridor, vanishing from sight. Jake took a deep breath and headed toward the ship's command center. He needed to cause chaos without raising suspicion about Shade. When he reached the command center, Jake found Commander Reed studying holographic maps of the moon's surface. "Commander," Jake said, "I believe I know where the Moors might be hiding." Reed looked up sharply. "Where?" "There's a cave system I documented during my research. It would provide ideal shelter for a creature that prefers darkness." Reed studied him suspiciously. "Why come forward with this now, Doctor?" "Because I've been reviewing my data," Jake improvised. "Some of my equipment detected unusual energy signatures from those caves yesterday. I dismissed it initially, But now I realize it might have been the Moors. Reed nodded slowly. Show me. Jake pointed to a location on the map, deliberately far from the ancient ruins where he was to meet Shade. Suddenly, the ship rocked violently. Emergency lights flashed as an announcement blared. Warning. Unauthorized launch of escape pod detected. Reed's face hardened. The creature is escaping. How did it get aboard? Jake feigned surprise. It was on the ship. How is that possible? Lock down all remaining pods, Reed ordered his officers, and prepare my shuttle. Dr. Miller, you're coming with me. Your knowledge of these caves could be useful. As they hurried toward Reed's shuttle, Jake felt his connection with Shade growing fainter with distance. But one clear impression remained. Beneath the ancient ruins lay something of immense importance, something that would explain everything about the Moors and why the Alliance feared them so much. Jake boarded the shuttle with Reed, his mind racing to formulate a plan. Whatever secret waited in those ruins, he needed to reach it before the commander discovered the truth. Commander Reed's shuttle cut through the moon's atmosphere, descending toward the false location Jake had provided. The craft shuddered as it entered a storm system, lightning flashing around them. These readings don't match your description, Doctor, Reed said, eyes narrowing as he studied the terrain scanner. There are no cave systems here. Jake feigned confusion. That's impossible. My data clearly showed. An alarm interrupted him as the shuttle systems detected an incoming transmission. The communication screen flickered to life, revealing the stern face of Dr. Ellis, the Alliance's chief science officer and Jake's former mentor. Commander Reed, Ellis said, her voice crisp with authority. Cease your operation immediately. Reed straightened. With respect, Doctor, I'm under direct orders to eliminate the Moor specimen. Those orders have been superseded, Ellis replied. The Science Council has reviewed Dr. Miller's research transmissions. We have serious questions about Project Umbra and your handling of the Moor species. Jake tried to hide his surprise. He had indeed sent his findings to Ellis before the evacuation, but never expected such a rapid response. Reed's face darkened. This creature is a threat to Alliance security. Perhaps, Ellis said, or perhaps we've been catastrophically wrong about the Moors. My team is approaching your position. Land your shuttle and wait for us. The screen went dark. Reed sat motionless for a moment, then turned to the pilot. Change course. Head for the ancient ruins in Sector 7. Jake's heart sank. The ruins? Why? Because that's where the Moors is really going, Reed said coldly, drawing his weapon. And you know it. Your shadow gave you away, Doctor. It moved against the light. Jake realized his mistake. In his concern over the change in plans, he had momentarily lost concentration. Without Shade's presence, he couldn't maintain the illusion. Commander, you don't understand what the Moors really are, Jake said, trying to reason with him. I understand perfectly, Reed replied. They're weapons. Living weapons created by an ancient civilization. Weapons the Alliance can control. The shuttle changed direction, heading toward the ruins where Shade waited. Jake had to warn his friend, but Reed kept his weapon trained on him. The Science Council won't let you continue these experiments, Jake said. Reed smiled thinly. The Science Council doesn't understand military necessity. The Moors' adaptive capabilities could revolutionize warfare. Imagine soldiers who could evolve in real time to counter any threat. The shuttle landed on the edge of the ruins. Massive stone structures half buried in the moon's surface. As they disembarked, Jake could sense Shade nearby, the bond between them strengthening again. Move, Reed ordered, pushing Jake forward with his weapon. They entered what appeared to be an ancient temple. Symbols covered the walls, similar to the drawings Shade had created in the cave. As they ventured deeper, the air grew heavy with energy. Fascinating, isn't it? Reed said, gesturing at the symbols. An entire civilization built around serving the Moors. They worshipped them as gods while using them as weapons. You're wrong, Jake said. The Moors weren't weapons. They were guardians. A shadow moved across the far wall. Shade emerged, its form larger and more defined than Jake had ever seen it. In this place, surrounded by the remnants of its ancestors, the creature seemed to draw power from the very stones. Reed raised his weapon. Finally, "Commander," Dr. Ellis's voice echoed through the chamber as she entered with a team of science officers and Alliance peacekeepers. "Lower your weapon. This creature is Alliance property," Reed insisted, weapons still aimed at Shade. "No living being is property," Ellis replied. She turned to Jake. "Your research was right, Dr. Miller. The Moors shows clear signs of advanced intelligence and non-aggressive adaptive behaviors." Reed laughed harshly. "Non-aggressive? It killed 6 scientists." "No, it didn't," Ellis said firmly. "We've reviewed the security logs from Project Umbra. The scientists died because of your ordered experiments, forcing the Moors to adapt to lethal conditions. You falsified reports to cover up your mistakes." Reed's face contorted with rage. "You understand nothing about security, about what we need to survive in this galaxy." He suddenly swung his weapon toward Ellis. In that same instant, Jake lunged forward to protect his mentor, while Shade moved with impossible speed. 3 shots echoed through the ancient chamber. Jake fell to the ground, pain blossoming in his chest, where Reed's weapon had struck him. Through fading vision, he saw Shade standing protectively over him, its form absorbing the other shots that had been meant for Ellis. Reed stood frozen, his weapon dropping from nerveless fingers as Alliance peacekeepers surrounded him. The last thing Jake saw before losing consciousness was Shade's 4 glowing eyes looking down at him, and in their bond, a promise. This is not the end. Jake opened his eyes to unfamiliar surroundings. He lay on a bed of soft moss inside what appeared to be one of the ancient ruins, but transformed. Crystal formations similar to those in Shade's cave now grew from the walls, bathing the chamber in gentle blue light. He touched his chest, where Reed's weapon had struck him. There was no pain, only a faint silvery mark on his skin. "You're awake," Dr. Ellis said, stepping into view. "We were starting to worry." "How long was I out?" Jake asked, his voice rough from disuse. 3 days, she replied. "You would have died if not for your friend." As if summoned by her words, Shade emerged from the shadows. The creature moved with new confidence, its form more defined than ever before. Through their bond, Jake felt not just Shade's presence but others too, distant minds observing with curiosity. "What happened?" Jake asked, sitting up slowly. "After you were shot, Shade refused to leave your side," Ellis explained. "It healed you somehow, used its adaptive abilities to repair your tissues." Shade moved closer, touching Jake's shoulder. Through their connection, Jake saw how it had happened. Shade had merged partially with him, sharing its regenerative abilities, changing its own structure to save his life. "Reed?" Jake asked. "In custody," Ellis said. "The Science Council has shut down Project Umbra permanently. They've also declared this moon a protected zone." Jake stood carefully, testing his strength. He felt different, stronger, more aware of his surroundings. The bond with Shade had changed him in ways he was only beginning to understand. "There's something else you should see," Ellis said, leading them deeper into the ruins. They entered a vast chamber where Alliance scientists worked alongside 3 other Moors. Jake gasped, looking to Shade in confusion. "They weren't all killed in the experiments," Ellis explained. "Reed hid them at different facilities. When the truth about Project Umbra came out, we found and released them." Through his bond with Shade, Jake felt the joy of reunion. The other Moors acknowledged him with curious mental touches, gentle, respectful explorations of the human who had bonded with one of their kind. At the center of the chamber stood a massive stone pillar covered in the same symbols Jake had seen throughout the ruins. Now, with Shade's knowledge flowing through him, he could understand them. "It's a warning," Jake said, running his fingers over the ancient text. "And a history." Ellis nodded. "We've begun to translate it. The civilization that once lived here didn't create the Moors as weapons. They partnered with them as protectors against something else. Jake closed his eyes, letting Shade's memories guide him. The Void Brethren, he said. A species that feeds on stars. The Moors were engineered to detect their approach and adapt to counter them. Yes, Ellis confirmed. And according to these records, the Void Brethren return to this galaxy every 5,000 years. When are they due back? Jake asked, though he already knew the answer through Shade. Now, Ellis said grimly. Astronomical data shows unusual stellar activity at the edge of our galaxy. The Alliance Council has called an emergency session. Through their bond, Shade showed Jake a vision. Thousands of Moors working alongside humans and other Alliance species, combining their knowledge and abilities to face the coming threat. We need to go to the Moors' homeworld, Jake said with sudden certainty. There's technology there, knowledge that could help us. Ellis smiled. The Council agreed. They've appointed you as the first human ambassador to the Moors civilization. A ship is being prepared as we speak. Jake turned to Shade, who now stood tall beside him, no longer hiding in shadows. Are you ready to go home? Shade's response flowed through their bond. Home was no longer just a place, but a connection. Where Jake went, Shade would follow. Where Shade went, Jake would be welcome. 1 month later, Jake stood on the surface of the Moors' homeworld, breathing air no human had ever breathed before. Around him, crystal forests sparkled under 3 suns. Beside him, Shade communicated with the Moors' elders, sharing everything they had learned. The Alliance ship in orbit represented a new beginning, not conquest or research, but partnership. The mistakes of the past were being replaced by understanding. As night fell and 2 of the 3 suns set, Jake and Shade stood together at the edge of a crystal cliff, looking up at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Void Brethren approached, unaware that their ancient enemies now had new allies. They think they're hunting us, Jake said softly. Shade's form rippled with what Jake now recognized as laughter. The hunter had indeed become the hunted. And together, human and Moors, science and adaptation, friendship against all odds, they would be ready.